It wasn't just a tragedy, it was a complete collapse of every safety net that was supposed to protect her. 13-year-old Kimmani Latig didn't simply die. She was abandoned by everyone who should have cared, and her final moments weren't just horrifying, they were preventable. This isn't one of those stories where you're left wondering what went wrong. It's one where everything went wrong, and the signs were there the entire time. The people who should have protected her, they had every warning, every opportunity, and they did nothing. But what's more disturbing is how deep this goes, because once you begin to trace the threads of Kimmani's life, it's clear. Her fate wasn't just the result of one monster. It was a chain reaction of failures from the very beginning. The night everything changed. On the surface, it seemed like a normal evening, until Darnell Jones asked his girlfriend to do something strange. He wanted the security cameras turned off. She hesitated. Why would someone who had nothing to hide be so concerned about the cameras? He claimed it was because he got home late, 5 a.m., and didn't want it to look bad. But something about that excuse didn't sit right. And luckily, she trusted her instinct. She left the cameras on. What they recorded would later become a key piece of evidence. Later that day, she watched him move something heavy from his SUV into the basement. Something rolled up inside a mat, the kind used to line the back of an SUV. Along with it, a pair of muddy work boots. He hadn't worked in weeks. She called the police. They came with a search warrant. And that decision may have cracked the case wide open. Kimmani had been missing for days. But when investigators found her body, even the most seasoned officers were stunned. The Lucas County coroner reported multiple sharp injuries to her neck. Her hands were missing. She was nearly decapitated. She hadn't just been harmed, she had been brutalized. And the man responsible wasn't some stranger in the night. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was someone who had been around her nearly every day. Someone who was trusted. Darnell Jones, the man she called Dad, but not her biological father. Just the one allowed into her life, over and over again. Darnell Jones wasn't new to the justice system. His rap sheet stretches back over a decade, and it's not full of minor infractions. It's filled with violence, weapons charges, and terrifying confrontations. In 2011, he tried to set a business on fire. He poured flammable liquid on the door, lit a match, and ran. Caught. Convicted, but only served a few months. In 2015, he pulled a firearm during a fight. Another conviction. More probation. Still no prison time. In 2017, he struck a man in the face with an alternator, splitting his nose and upper lip. Then there was the domestic incident in 2019 that still haunts neighbors. He was seen holding his wife by the neck over a second-story balcony, ready to throw her off. She screamed. Neighbors watched in horror. Police were called, and yet, even with eyewitnesses, even with physical evidence, he got probation. Again, in 2022, he was arrested for being a felon in possession of a firearm, plus discharging it while intoxicated. So why, after all of this, was Darnell still allowed around children? Kimmani's life was never stable. Her mother wasn't raising her. From just 9 months old, she was shuffled between her grandmother and her godmother. Neither home offered true stability, and neither stopped Darnell from entering her life. Despite his violent record, Darnell was allowed to be there, around her, in her life. Some family members have claimed they didn't know the full extent of his past, but his arrests weren't secrets. They were public record. They were in the news. So the real question becomes, did they truly not know, or did they just not care enough to look? Over the course of her short life, Kimmani attended 6 different schools. 6. That's not just instability. It's a pattern, a way to escape accountability. And in nearly every one of those schools, teachers noticed something. She had bruises, marks on her arms, on her neck. One teacher tried everything to get her removed from the environment. But each time, it seemed like the answer was the same. Move her somewhere new. Fresh start. New teachers. New silence. She told classmates she was scared. She wore long sleeves to hide bruises, and yet nothing was done. Lucas County Children's Services received 3 reports about Kimmani between December 2023 and March 2024. One report was just days before her disappearance. Their conclusion? There was no evidence to necessitate removal from the home. They said they spoke to her in private, that she didn't admit to abuse, that they gave the family resources. But then came the grandmother's shocking admission. She said caseworkers told her to discipline Kimmani by hitting her on the buttocks instead of anywhere else. Let that sink in. They didn't tell her to stop. They told her where to hit the child so it wouldn't leave visible marks. This wasn't protection, it was camouflage. This is where it gets harder, because it wasn't just the system that failed her, it was the people in her own family. Her mother, who seemed almost absent from her life. Her grandmother, who had already been investigated by schools and social workers. Even the godmother, who had custody at different times. What did she know? And yet, Darnell was always around, always in the background, always there, despite his past. Why didn't anyone stop him? Why didn't anyone pull Kimmani out for good? Since the case broke, outrage has spread across Toledo and beyond. Neighbors are asking, why did no one act sooner? Parents are wondering, could this happen to my child? And child advocates are pointing to the same issue they've seen for years: underfunded systems, overwhelmed caseworkers, and protocols that prioritize procedure over protection. But in this case, no amount of red tape can explain the level of failure. This wasn't a missed sign. It was a fire alarm going off and no one responding. It's easy to point fingers after the fact. It's harder to ask the uncomfortable questions. Why do we keep allowing violent offenders access to children? Why are school warnings ignored until it's too late? Why are families allowed to shuffle children around like chess pieces to avoid consequences? And perhaps the darkest question of all, was there more that people aren't saying? Because some parts of this story still don't add up. How did Darnell know to hide evidence so carefully? Why did the grandmother speak so casually about physical discipline? Why didn't any adult remove her from that home? Ever. Kimmani didn't die because of one man's evil. She died because of years of silence, layers of neglect, and a system that was supposed to protect her but didn't. The red flags were everywhere. But instead of action, there was silence. Instead of safety, she got excuses. Instead of protection, she was moved around, ignored, and ultimately destroyed by the very people she should have trusted. And if we don't ask the hard questions now, Kimmani won't be the last. This wasn't just a crime, it was a warning. And if no one's held accountable, this will happen again. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, because silence is what let this happen in the first place.